Do you ever feel like you're running on a financial treadmill? You're working harder, maybe even earning more, but your savings account just isn't growing the way you'd expect. It's not just you, and you're definitely not crazy for feeling this way. Saving money today is genuinely, demonstrably harder than it was for our parents' generation just 20 years ago. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Isn't this just another avocado toast argument? Or maybe people just spend too much on lattes and subscriptions, and while personal spending habits are a piece of the puzzle, they're a tiny piece. The reality is that the entire economic landscape has shifted under our feet. We're playing a different game now with a different set of rules. Over the next few minutes, we're going to dive deep into the real reasons why building wealth feels like an uphill battle. We'll peel back the layers and look at the hard data, moving beyond the tired old cliches. We're talking about the triple threat of stagnant wages, the soaring cost of essentials, and the crushing weight of modern debt. It's not about blame, it's about understanding the systemic changes that have stacked the deck against the average person. Let's start with the most fundamental part of the equation, income. You'd think that with decades of economic growth and technological progress, our paychecks would have skyrocketed, right? Well, the story here is a bit more complicated. Sure, the number on your payslip might be higher than what your parents earned in the early 2000s, but what really matters is purchasing power. What can that money actually buy you? This is where we introduce the concept of wage stagnation. For decades, worker productivity has been on a steady upward climb. We're creating more value per hour than ever before. Logically, our wages should have kept pace. But they haven't since the 1970s, and particularly over the last 20 years, a huge gap has opened up between productivity and pay. The economic pie got bigger, but the slice going to the average worker has shrunk. So, while the top earners have seen their income soar, the wages for the vast majority of people have barely budged when you adjust for inflation. Think about it this way. Your raise last year might have been 3%, but if the cost of everything you buy went up by 4%, you've actually taken a pay cut in real terms. You're working just as hard, if not harder, but your ability to get ahead is diminishing. This isn't a feeling, it's an economic fact that millions of people are living every single day. Now, let's pair that with the other side of the coin, the cost of living. This isn't just about the price of a movie ticket or a new smartphone. We're talking about the non-negotiable pillars of a stable life: housing, education, and health care. And in these areas, the price increases haven't just been gradual, they've been explosive. Take housing, for example. 20 years ago, the dream of home ownership was far more attainable for young people. The ratio of median home prices to median income was significantly lower. Today, in many major cities and even suburban areas, that ratio has ballooned to absurd levels. A down payment that was once manageable now requires years, sometimes decades, of aggressive saving, all while you're paying ever-increasing rent. Rent itself has become a huge financial burden, often consuming 30, 40, or even 50% of a person's take-home pay, leaving very little left over for savings or other goals. Then there's education. The cost of a college degree has outpaced inflation by a staggering amount. What was once a ticket to the middle class now comes with a mortgage-sized student loan attached. We tell young people that a degree is essential for a good job, but we saddle them with a level of debt that their parents could never have imagined. This debt follows them for years, delaying major life milestones like buying a home, starting a family, or even saving for retirement. It's like starting a race with a 100-pound backpack on. And we can't forget health care. Costs have consistently risen faster than inflation. Premiums, deductibles, and out-of-pocket expenses are higher than ever. A single unexpected medical emergency can wipe out a family's entire savings, even if they have insurance. This creates a constant, low-level financial anxiety. You're always one bad diagnosis away from a financial crisis, which makes it incredibly difficult to build a secure financial future. So you have wages that aren't keeping up, and you have the costs of the absolute necessities for a decent life: shelter, education, health skyrocketing. This combination creates a powerful squeeze on the average household budget. It's a recipe for financial stress. Before you even think about buying a new gadget, going on vacation, or investing for the future, a huge portion of your income is already spoken for by these three giants. This brings us to our third major factor: the changing nature of debt. Beyond student loans, the financial landscape is now saturated with new forms of credit and new pressures to use it. 20 years ago, the concept of buy now, pay later wasn't a button on every checkout page. Credit was more straightforward. Today, we're bombarded with offers. Easy credit cards, personal loans, car financing with 7-year terms, and these ubiquitous installment plans. They make large purchases seem affordable in the short term, but they normalize being in a constant state of debt. The psychological barrier to borrowing has been lowered dramatically. This isn't a moral failing, it's a feature of our consumer economy. Companies have become incredibly sophisticated at marketing debt as a convenient lifestyle tool. Furthermore, the very definition of a necessity has expanded, partly due to technology. A reliable smartphone and a home internet connection are no longer luxuries. They are essential tools for work, school, and social participation. These are new, recurring costs that didn't exist in the same way 20 years ago. When you add all this up, the wage stagnation, the exploding cost of core needs, and the easy access and normalization of debt, the picture becomes crystal clear. Saving money isn't harder because people are less disciplined. It's harder because the fundamental economic structures have shifted. The safety nets are smaller, the costs are higher, and the path to financial stability is filled with more obstacles than ever before. Recognizing this isn't about making excuses. It's about having an honest conversation about the challenges we face. It's the first step toward finding real, effective strategies that work in the world we live in today, not the world of 20 years ago. Understanding the why is crucial before we can even begin to tackle the how, and that's exactly what we're going to explore next. Let's rewind the clock about 20 years, to the early 2000s. What did the financial world look like for an average person trying to save money? It was a different era, for sure. Think about it. The dot-com bubble had just burst, but the global financial crisis of 2008 was still a few years away. For many, this period felt like a time of relative stability and optimism. First, let's talk about the big one: housing. Back then, the dream of home ownership felt much more attainable for young people. The median home price in the U.S. was significantly lower, even when you adjust for inflation. A typical starter home didn't require you to sacrifice every penny you had for a down payment. You could realistically aim to buy a house in your 20s or early 30s without feeling like you were signing up for a lifetime of debt. Rent was also more reasonable. The pressure to spend over 30% of your income just on a roof over your head wasn't as intense as it is today. This meant more of your paycheck could be allocated to savings or other financial goals. Then there was education. The cost of college was rising, yes, but it hadn't reached the astronomical levels we see now. Student loan debt was a concern, but it wasn't the nationwide crisis it has become. Graduating with a manageable amount of debt, or even debt-free with the help of part-time jobs and family support, was a common story. This gave graduates a huge head start. Instead of their first decade in the workforce being dedicated to paying off crushing student loans, they could start building wealth, investing, and saving for the future almost immediately after getting their diploma. What about everyday costs? Inflation was generally low and stable. The price of groceries, gas, and utilities didn't seem to fluctuate as wildly. You could go to the supermarket with a $50 bill and come out with a decent haul of groceries for the week. This predictability in day-to-day expenses made budgeting much simpler. You knew roughly what your essential costs would be each month, making it easier to set aside a fixed amount for savings. There wasn't this constant feeling of being nickel and dimed by surprise price hikes on everything from eggs to electricity. And let's not forget about interest rates. This is a crucial piece of the puzzle. 20 years ago, savings accounts actually paid you a decent return. You could put your money in a high-yield savings account or a certificate of deposit, ACD, and watch it grow at a respectable rate, often outpacing inflation. Saving money felt rewarding because you could see the tangible results of your discipline. Your savings were actively working for you, generating passive income. It wasn't just about stashing cash under a mattress. It was about strategically growing your nest egg with low-risk tools that were accessible to everyone. The job market also had a different feel. While the concept of a job for life was fading, there was still a stronger sense of loyalty between employers and employees. Pensions were more common in certain sectors, offering a guaranteed income stream in retirement. Even for those without pensions, employer-sponsored 401k plans often came with generous company matches. The social contract felt a bit more intact. You work hard for a company, and in return, they help you secure your financial future. Now, let's talk about consumer culture. The internet was there, of course, but it hadn't fully transformed into the 24/7 marketplace it is today. Amazon was primarily a bookseller, not the everything store. Social media was in its infancy. MySpace was the big thing, not Instagram or TikTok. This meant you weren't constantly bombarded with targeted ads and influencer lifestyles telling you what to buy. The pressure to keep up with the Joneses existed, but it was mostly limited to your immediate social circle, not a global network of perfectly curated images. Impulse buying was harder when you had to physically go to a store. There was less fear of missing out or FOMO, driving consumption. Think about technology. A flip phone was the standard. You didn't have a supercomputer in your pocket with dozens of subscription-based apps draining your bank account every month. Entertainment was simpler. You rented a DVD from Blockbuster. You didn't have 5 different streaming services to pay for. These small, recurring monthly charges that we barely notice today simply didn't exist on the same scale. This made tracking expenses more straightforward. Your major bills were things like your mortgage, your car payment, and your utilities, not a long list of digital subscriptions. So, when we put all these pieces together, a clear picture emerges. 20 years ago, the fundamental pillars of financial security, housing, education, and stable costs were more solid. The path to saving was more straightforward. You could get a decent education without crippling debt, buy a home at a reasonable price, and count on your savings to actually grow. The cultural and technological landscape created fewer temptations and less pressure to spend. It wasn't a perfect utopia, of course. People still faced financial challenges, but the baseline was different. The headwind against savers was a gentle breeze compared to the hurricane many people feel they're facing today. Understanding this context is key to seeing just how much the game has changed. Have you ever felt like you were playing a game on hard mode when it comes to saving money? You're doing everything right, you're budgeting, you're cutting back, but your savings account just isn't growing the way you'd expect. It's not just you, and it's not just about willpower. Today, we're diving deep into the big, structural changes in our economy and society over the past 20 years that have fundamentally made saving money harder for millions of people. This isn't about blaming yourself, it's about understanding the system you're operating in. First, let's talk about the seismic shift in the job market. 20 or 30 years ago, the path was clearer for many. Get a stable job, probably with a pension, and stay there for a long time. That stability was the bedrock of financial planning, but today, the rise of the gig economy and short-term contract work has completely changed the landscape. While it offers flexibility, it often comes at the cost of stability and benefits. Think about it, no employer-sponsored retirement plans, no paid sick leave, and unpredictable income streams. How can you plan for retirement when you don't know what you'll make next month? This precarity forces people into a constant state of financial defense, using any extra cash to cover immediate needs or the next dry spell. Rather than building long-term wealth, saving becomes a luxury, not a given. Next up is something that affects nearly everyone: the crippling burden of debt. Specifically, student loan debt and housing costs. 20 years ago, the cost of a college education was high, but it wasn't the mountain it is today. Now, entire generations are starting their careers tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars in the red. A significant chunk of their monthly income is immediately diverted to loan payments, money that could have been going into a 401k, a down payment for a house, or an emergency fund. It's like starting a marathon 10 miles behind the starting line. And speaking of housing, the dream of homeownership has become a major source of financial stress. In many cities, home prices have skyrocketed, far outpacing wage growth. This means people are either forced to take on massive mortgages that stretch their budgets to the breaking point, or they restuck in a rental trap where rising rents eat up a huge portion of their income, making it nearly impossible to save for a down payment. The foundation of wealth for previous generations' home equity is now much harder to access. Let's also look at the changing nature of wages and wealth inequality. You've probably heard the term wage stagnation, and it's a real phenomenon. For decades, while the productivity of workers has gone up, meaning we're creating more value for our employers, the median wage has barely budged when adjusted for inflation. So, you're working harder and producing more, but your paycheck doesn't reflect that. Meanwhile, the cost of everything essential: health care, education, housing has soared. This creates a powerful squeeze. Your income is flat, but your expenses are on a rocket ship. The gap between the very wealthy and everyone else has also widened dramatically. Wealth tends to generate more wealth through investments and assets. But if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you don't have the capital to invest and participate in that growth. The system is increasingly tilted to favor those who already have money, making it incredibly difficult for the average person to get ahead and build a safety net. Another subtle but powerful change is the erosion of social safety nets and the privatization of risk. In the past, there was a stronger sense of collective responsibility. Pensions, for example, were a defined benefit plan. Your employer guaranteed you a certain income in retirement. The risk was on the company. Now, the dominant model is the 401k, a defined contribution plan. The risk is entirely on you, the employee. Your retirement security depends on how much you can afford to contribute and how well your investments perform in a volatile market. The same shift has happened with health care, where high-deductible plans are common, placing a greater financial burden on individuals when they get sick. Essentially, risks that were once pooled and managed by institutions, be it corporations or the government, have been offloaded onto the individual. This means you need a much larger personal savings buffer to handle life's uncertainties, yet the economic realities we've discussed make building that buffer harder than ever. Finally, we can't ignore the psychological and technological shifts. We live in a world of hyper-consumerism, fueled by targeted advertising and the buy now, pay later culture. Technology has made spending money frictionless. With a single click, you can have anything delivered to your door. This constant exposure to temptation and the ease of spending creates a challenging environment for savers. Furthermore, the social pressure to keep up with the Joneses is now amplified on a global scale through social media. You're not just comparing yourself to your neighbor. You're comparing your life to the curated, picture-perfect lives of influencers and celebrities. This can create a feeling of inadequacy and a desire to spend money on things that provide a short-term boost but detract from long-term financial goals. It's a psychological battleground that previous generations didn't have to navigate in the same way. So, when you look at the whole picture, the precarious job market, the crushing debt, stagnant wages, the offloading of risk, and the psychological pressures of modern consumerism, it's clear that the deck is stacked against savers in a way it simply wasn't 20 years ago. It's not about a lack of discipline, it's about navigating a fundamentally different and more challenging economic system. Understanding these structural barriers is the first step. It allows us to stop blaming ourselves and start having a more honest conversation about what needs to change, both in our own strategies and in the broader system itself. In our next video, we talk about concrete strategies you can use to fight back and build wealth even in this challenging environment. So, after everything we've talked about the soaring cost of living, wages that just can't keep up, and that mountain of debt so many of us are facing, what does this all actually mean for us right now, today? And more importantly, what can we do about it? Let's get real. The consequences are hitting us where it hurts. Major life milestones, the ones our parents and grandparents took for granted, are being pushed further and further down the road. Think about it, buying a first home, starting a family, even just feeling financially secure enough to take a real vacation. For many younger people, these don't feel like achievable goals anymore. They feel like distant dreams. This isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about a fundamental shift in our quality of life and our expectations for the future. The stress is immense. We're living in a state of constant financial anxiety, always worried about the next unexpected bill, the next rent hike. This constant pressure takes a toll on our mental health, our relationships, and our overall well-being. It creates a scarcity mindset where we so focused on just getting by day to day that we can't even begin to think about long-term planning or saving for retirement. It's a survival mode, not a thriving mode. And this has a ripple effect across the entire economy. When millions of people can't afford to buy homes, go on vacation, or make major purchases, consumer spending slows down. This can lead to economic stagnation. It also widens the wealth gap. Those who already have assets, like property or investments, see their wealth grow, while those of us trying to build from scratch are left further and further behind. It creates a two-tiered society where financial mobility becomes incredibly difficult. We're seeing a generation that, despite being more educated than any before it, is on track to be less financially well-off than their parents. That's a reversal of a trend that has defined progress for centuries. Okay, that all sounds pretty bleak, I know. But I am not here to just leave you with a sense of doom and gloom. Acknowledging the problem is the first step, but the most important step is figuring out the way forward. And there is a way forward. It requires a two-pronged approach: personal action and systemic change. Let's start with what we can control: our personal actions. The old advice of just save more or cut back on lattes feels insulting when you already stretched to the limit. We need a modern, realistic approach. First, let's redefine what saving looks like. In today's world, aggressively paying down high-interest debt like credit cards is a form of saving. The money you're not paying in interest is money you're keeping in your pocket. It's a guaranteed return on your investment, so prioritize that. Create a debt snowball or debt avalanche plan, whichever method motivates you more, and attack that high-interest debt with everything you've got. Second, we need to get smarter and more creative with our income. The traditional 9-to-5 single-income model is fragile. I'm not saying everyone needs to become a full-time entrepreneur, but exploring side hustles or freelance opportunities can be a game changer. This isn't just about hustle culture burnout. It's about building financial resilience. Even an extra few $100s a month can be the difference between sinking and swimming. It could be the money that pays down a credit card, builds an emergency fund, or finally starts a small investment account. Think about your skills. Can you write, design, code, walk dogs, or teach a language online? Platforms like Upwork, Fiverr, or even local community groups can be great places to start. Third, automation is your best friend. The concept of paying yourself first is more crucial now than ever. The trick is to make it painless and automatic. Set up an automatic transfer from your checking account to a separate, high-yield savings account the day you get paid. even if it's just $20 or $50 to start. The key is that the money is gone before you even have a chance to miss it or spend it. Over time, this small, consistent action builds a powerful habit and a surprisingly large nest egg. As your income grows or your debt shrinks, you can slowly increase that automated transfer amount. And finally, on the personal front, we have to talk about investing. I know it can sound intimidating, like something only for rich people in suits. But that's no longer true. Thanks to technology, investing is more accessible than ever. Apps like Acorns, Stash, or platforms like Fidelity and Vanguard allow you to start with very small amounts of money. You can invest in low-cost index funds or ETFs, which are a great way to diversify your money without needing to be an expert stock picker. The goal here isn't to get rich quick, it's to have your money start working for you, to outpace inflation, and to build long-term wealth. Even small, consistent investments can grow into substantial sums over time, thanks to the magic of compound interest. Education is key here. Spend some time on YouTube, read blogs, listen to podcasts. There's a wealth of free, high-quality information out there to help you get started comfortably. Now, let's zoom out to the bigger picture because personal responsibility alone can't solve a systemic problem. We need to advocate for change. This means using our voices and our votes to push for policies that actually support working people. What does that look like? For starters, we need policies that address the cost of living crisis. This includes advocating for more affordable housing, whether that's through zoning reform to allow for more construction, rent control measures, or government subsidies for first-time home buyers. It's about making sure that a safe place to live doesn't consume half of our paychecks. We also need to talk about wages. We should support policies that tie the minimum wage to inflation and advocate for stronger worker protections and collective bargaining rights. When workers have more power, they can negotiate for better pay and benefits, which helps close the gap between productivity and compensation that we talked about earlier. And let's not forget about health care and education. The astronomical cost of health care and student loan debt are two of the biggest anchors holding people back. We need to push for reforms that make health care affordable and accessible for everyone, and we need real meaningful solutions to the student debt crisis, whether that's through loan forgiveness, lower interest rates, or more funding for tuition-free public colleges and trade schools. So, what's the ultimate takeaway from all of this? Yes, saving money is objectively harder now than it was for previous generations. The rules of the game have changed. It's not your fault that you're finding it difficult. But acknowledging that difficulty isn't an excuse for inaction, it's a call to action. It's a call to be smarter, more strategic, and more resilient with our personal finances. It's a call to attack debt, diversify our income, automate our savings, and start investing, no matter how small. And just as importantly, it's a call to be engaged citizens, to demand that our economic system works for the many, not just the few. The path forward is a combination of individual grit and collective action. By taking control of what we can and fighting for the changes we need, we can start to rebuild a future where financial security isn't a luxury, but a realistic goal for everyone. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight, but it is possible. Thank you so much for watching this series. I hope it's given you some clarity and, more importantly, some hope.